we as bonsai artists should already know, if not have already picked up the lesson of resilience, and that in this time that we have, that it's, even though it's difficult, or for some of us it's a little bit of a challenge, there's a lesson that we learn from bonsai, that we continue to survive no matter what. And we see this when we do our artwork, that our bonsai, that we include the sherry, the gin, that shows some of the things that the tree go through. And that's exactly what we do in times like this, right? So and I believe that as a bonsai community, we all share that lesson. So welcome everyone, and thank you for being very patient with us and hanging in there with us through this difficult and challenging time. uh, Tonight we're very excited to have our first virtual um, demo meeting presentation. And forgive us if there's a little bit of technical issues like I'm doing right now, but we'll get through this. I've got three or four things I have in my list. And the first thing is the good news is that because of the things that happened with COVID, we weren't able to get artists here physically, and so we've kind of cut back on renting the facilities, and obviously, um, our artist piece is a little bit different now. And so as a result, we have some savings that we would like to pass on to our club members by way of discounted um, membership for next year. Now, as you remember, this is um, our club is a nonprofit organization, so we will always welcome the full amount of membership, but we want to give you that option next year to pay 50% of the total membership fee. So that's one of the good news that came out of this. Um, the other thing is that as you noticed, we've recently been putting out newsletters digitally, and I hope that you folks are enjoying that, and that if there's any feedback, please forward it to us. But so far, we've gotten really good feedback from folks that I've talked to about the newsletter. And really thanks to the board members, we've collaborated and worked on this very hard. But the key people that really it's come together is our secretary Bruce Williams has done so much work on this. And I want to applaud him for doing that, and I hope that gave a little bit of life to your bonsai journey, and at least get to know what we're doing. Also, Maria has also provided a lot of articles that are included in the newsletter. So thanks to Maria for that. But hopefully that you continue to read those. We have a very good response on the newsletter, and that we will continue to provide those as long as obviously we're able. With that, next thing is let's see. So we got the newsletter. The year is coming up to an end for this year, and typically November is the time for us to vote for new board members. And because of COVID, we haven't been able to physically make contact with folks, and that we haven't been able to really develop potential board members. But we know we have some great ones out there. So
Here's what you would expect from, quote, a wage earner with one exemption in the $7,000 a year income.
Sorry, somebody need to mute there.
Making 200
I'm going to mute everyone and then unmute you, okay?
Okay.
Mute everybody.
Honestly mailed to that newspaper. Nixon was a federal tax bill in 1970 of $792.81. That's it.
Okay, Tony, go ahead.
All right. If you are listening in, make sure you mute your speakers. So anyway, continuing on. We are in the process of changing out our board members. There's about 3 or 4 board members that we need to replace because of the term coming up in November. We would appreciate any nominations or volunteers that would come forward and fill in some of the board members. You will be hearing more about this in our newsletter. But November is supposedly our voting time, but we may not have enough time to fill in those positions. So we may have to extend it. I believe our bylaws allows us to extend it for 90 days, I believe. So, so that's one. You keep an eye on that, and hope that we get some nominations or even volunteers that will come forward. Lastly, obviously, Lad has been working hard to provide a great lineup for us. Of course, this evening we have a great one that we have our first virtual presentation with. But Lad can maybe talk a little bit more about future lineup and then introduce Sergio here in a minute. So Lad, you can take over, and I'm going to turn my computer around.
Cool. Thank you, Tony. Welcome, everybody, for our first Zoom bonsai meeting. We're pumped up tonight to have Sergio with us tonight. So just a couple things about Sergio Cuan for us is that, just to let you know, he'll show us a little bit of this, but in 2014, he built his bonsai garden in northern New Jersey in a beautiful setting surrounded by rolling hills, lakes, and deciduous forests. It's absolutely gorgeous. You're going to be really pleased about how he's built his garden and stuff. And his work has appeared in the International Bonsai Magazine, Bonsai Focus Magazine, and Bonsai Bark blog. His work has been shown in numerous exhibits and has received several awards, including the Finest Deciduous Award at the 2014 U.S. National Bonsai Exhibition in Rochester, New York, and the Best in Show at the 2016 Winter Silhouette Expo in North Carolina. In 2020, his beech forest placed first out of more than 600 entries in the virtual World Bonsai Day exhibition that was sponsored by the California Bonsai Society. So without further ado, I'm going to make Sergio a co-host. Make a co-host. Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, and I think you're ready to go, Sergio, to share your screen.
All right. Thank you so much, Lad. Thank you, Tony, and thank you for the rest of you guys to give me this opportunity to present to you, my work today. I wish, of course, that this had been in person, but hopefully you guys will enjoy this. And I'm very, very happy to be, I guess, your guinea pig. So I wasn't even aware that was your first one. So I'm honored. Okay. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. Just very quickly, I will say that the presentation, just to give you a quick sort of snapshot of it, is divided into 3 sections. The first section, I'm going to give you kind of a quick tour of my garden. Second section, I will do some of my work. And the last section, where it's a few case studies that I put together for you guys that sort of explain step by step sort of advanced techniques such as root grafting for deciduous trees. So we're going to focus today's presentation on the deciduous work. I know that you guys have been looking forward to it, and again, I hope that after this presentation there's a lot of questions and you enjoy the presentation. Anyway, I am going to share my screen now. I'm going to attempt that. Okay, you guys see that? I'm hoping. Yep, okay. And you should see full screen now. Okay, See Lad nodding, so good. Okay, so we're gonna skip this slide. Thank you for the introduction, Lad. I will continue. Let me see. Okay, so again, I'm gonna show you a few shots of the garden. So my garden was built back in, as Lad mentioned, in 2014, so it's not very old. I tried to build a garden that took some of the design cues, if you will, from some of the Japanese gardens that I had seen in a couple of travels that I've done to in Japan, and also it's got a bit of a Western style. So I wouldn't say that this is purely, by no means, purely a Japanese garden, but I have taken some design cues from those gardens. So you can see a shot here. Oops, somehow, okay, here we go. There we go. Another shot here, that's a chochubai right in front that you're seeing. This is back in, I believe this was taken last, I believe early April of this year. Another angle. I have lots of deciduous. I have a few conifers, but again, a lot of my work focuses around deciduous works, in particular my Japanese maples. As you see, I have design areas with gravel, just to give, the whole thing was basically designed to highlight the trees and kind of design a space that would allow me to kind of be, work around the garden and be practical. So I tried to create as many negative areas as possible. I didn't want to try to jam it in with full of trees. Although, again, it's really hard because every time we have an empty space, at least for me, I'm tempted to kind of fill it with another tree, but I've been trying to fight that tendency. Another shot, late afternoon. This is a recent picture of the garden. You can see here I have a rain chain, and down here I have a Japanese lantern. So outside of those two elements, I didn't really put any other Japanese touches in there. It really more focused on the aesthetics, basically, of Japanese gardens rather than trying to get elements from a garden in this space. Another angle. I get pretty good light. You'll notice an arbor back here. And if you can imagine, this was all raw, just a field of grass. And the first piece that I built out of the garden was actually this arbor back here. And at that time, I didn't really envision a whole, building a whole bonsai garden, to be honest. I needed, I needed to build a shade structure, basically. So that I could shade some of my maples in the summer, but then from there everything grew out of that arbor. Japanese red pine in the foreground. I have some water features, not maybe as fancy as I had the privilege of Tony gave me a quick tour of his garden right before we started the meeting, and he's got a nice water feature. I wanted to do something in the center, kind of like a koi pond, but I was telling Lad and Tony that my wife put basically a stop to that. He said, no, you're not gonna take care of bonsai and fish at the same time. So I resorted to placing some water features around the garden, and this is one of them. They're perennial water lilies. Another view of the garden. This is right here in the foreground, is that I will show you a little bit later in the presentation. That's a weeping ball cypress. We get beautiful color. I'm sure you guys do too, in the Northeast. And this was taken about, this is maybe 3 years old, this picture here. This is a really large Yatsubusa elm again in autumn. This actually originally was purchased from Mirai. Another view, another shot of autumn. Back here in the background, you can see that's a sharp pygmy that I will show you a little more in detail a little bit later on in the presentation. That's the tree that was fortunate enough to win Best Deciduous back in 2014 at the U.S. National. Winter shot. Here in the foreground is a twin trunk Arakawa, and back here is that sharp pygmy once again. And invariably, this is what we get in the wintertime. So in wintertime, nothing is left in the benches. Everything is put away. Fortunately, I don't have a greenhouse. In case you guys are wondering, I put it all in an unheated garage, and that's what I've been doing for many years. It works. Plans are for me to build eventually a greenhouse, but no greenhouse as of today. So, but anyway, so this is just a view of the the stark contrast of what you just saw in the middle of summer and going into the dead of winter. And that is it for this section here. Any questions at this time? Lad, I cannot hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't get anything on the chat line, so I guess continue on, Sergio.
Okay, let's keep rocking and rolling. Okay, so I'm going to show you the next section is going to be several, sort of transformations, if you will, or progressions of my work. And, we'll start with the Arakawa, twin trunk Arakawa. This was about a year after I purchased it. I actually won this in an auction on eBay. And I liked it. I love twin trunks. I love anything that has multiple trunks. And Arakawa is an interesting, cultivar. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Arakawa, but it's just beautiful. You have pretty much everything. You have fine ramification. You have bark texture. It's beautiful. And you have autumn color. You have everything in this sort of tree. So anyway, so this is about a year after I purchased it. You may wonder what these funny little whips are, and that's in anticipation of doing. I thought at the time I needed one or two approach grafts. I ended up doing just one, and it was in here. The original apex of this tree died off, and I had wire this branch up to start creating my new apex. And I needed something on the outside corner of this right here. So I grew this, in that previous year. And this is a shot of the tree. I believe this was taken in February or March. Okay, this is just a couple of hours, few hours right after the previous picture that you saw. This is right after I have wired everything, all the branches all the way to the tips. And you can see the big loop here that I've made. With the two push pins to hold my approach graft in place. And here's where I'm placing, right here is where my branch outside of the corner will be. Okay. Now, the other thing that to notice is, and it's difficult to tell in pictures, but the tree was rotated slightly bit this way to give a little bit of a directionality to the design. When the original front was right in here, so that these two trunks were parallel to the viewer, this made for a more dynamic kind of sort of image composition, pushing this little trunk back a little bit further back into the background. So again, sometimes in bonsai, I actually say many times in bonsai, even the slight change of angle, whether it's up or down or a little bit to the left or right, can make a really dramatic difference in your design. This is about a year later, or perhaps 2 years later. you can see how the tree is filling out. I think it was a year later actually. And I had wired my, notice the new branch here. By this time it has taken and it was ready to be cut off, separated from the original whip. And here is my new branch in place right outside of the corner. You may also wonder what this is. This was a root, originally started as a root graft. And what happened was I started looking at the design and I started liking this little thing as a potential small little trunk, so to form part of permanent part of the design. So you'll see in a moment how it's playing out. But this was originally just a root graft, and it was going to be, pruned off so that I could just preserve the root itself. But again, I decided to keep the whole thing. And here is about, I think this was taken maybe 2 years ago. And the big change, of course, now is in a rectangular coir pot, which I think is much more fitting. The tree somehow looks more dignified in that pot. And you can kind of see now how I'm starting to build my canopy out of that little, whip that I had originally. It has a long way to go, but it's on its way. Now, notice again how much more developed the approach graft branch is now. Is starting to ramify well, and that original little sort of side branch that I wired up is starting to get very, very full, sort of getting a rounded kind of canopy, silhouette on the tree, just to get that, once again, that rounded, billowy quality that is so typical of the deciduous trees. This is the same Arakawa last spring. By the way, I don't know if you guys are subscribed to International Bonsai Magazine. This will come out, I believe, this month. There's an article on this Japanese maple. The unique part about this Arakawa is that most of the ones that I've seen in the spring, they have a green color with a little bit of red in the leaves. I have not seen an Arakawa that is this red. It comes out really, really, really red, which I believe is very unique. I have not seen an Arakawa with this sort of spring color. Next up is a Japanese beech. And this is back a photograph that was taken back in 2003 or 4, around that time. And this was, a forest that was imported from Japan. That forest at some point ended up, and I don't know if you guys know the Kennett Collection in Pennsylvania, very famous. And Doug Paul is the owner of the Kennett Collection. And in 2014, he had a big sale of a section of his collection. And this was held at some, I forget the name of the nursery, but a lot of people attended that sale. The prices were, incredibly low for the quality of trees. But the reason why I'm showing you this picture is here is that same forest down here in the bottom. And at the time was already planted on a slab. So I had my eyes on it because just coming across a Japanese beech that is of any age in the US is difficult. Here is just a few hours later after I came back home. I put it up on my studio. I looked at it and I thought that I immediately kind of identified what was originally the back of the tree as the new front. I looked at this and I felt like this main tree here had better movement than the back of it, basically, which was original front. And I assumed that they put this netting here just to hold everything together, and eventually this will go away. But this was just a few hours after I came back home that day with my tree. At the same time, I will say that while it was pretty well ramified, it needed to be organized much, I think, in a better way, at least in my opinion. The tree looked kind of lopsided. It was low here, it was up here, and even in the interiors, some of the branches were growing towards the trunks and all that. So I wanted to establish some kind of, organize basically the branch structure so that it kind of made sense, you know, within the composition. So, and here is I think about a year later. So you can see how I'm starting to lower this right part of the composition. Of course, the netting is gone and the moss grew kind of naturally. I started planting some small azaleas here just for accents and stuff like that. But I'm trying to, again, I'm wiring certain branches every single year to try to kind of reorganize that canopy a little bit better. I'm trying to build here my new canopy kind of more rounded. Here is the tree, same tree. This was 2016, 1 week right before it was exhibited at the U.S. National in 2016. And obviously here is in full leaf in very late August. Here's a tree as photographed in the Winter Silhouette in Canopolis. This is when it won best tree that year. So I was very fortunate and happy that it got that award. And here's how it was photographed. Notice now it was displayed in a clear plexiglass table. There was something beautiful for me that I wanted to do something a little bit out of the ordinary, a little bit, you know, push the envelope, if you will, but hopefully in an elegant way that it would not detract from the actual tree itself. So I decided to do this plexiglass. There was something about the cold plexi as the material in contrast with the warmth of the stone and the trees that was kind of beautiful to me. The other thing too, it had this effect that the tree was almost in an island in the middle of water. So it had kind of like a cool effect. When I displayed this, not at Canopolis, but at the U.S. National, I also displayed it with this table. And it was an interesting thing because a lot of traditionalists did not like this at all. They thought that I should have used a wooden table. And there were other people, maybe a little bit more forward thinking perhaps, that they really enjoyed the display. And here is a very recent picture. This was taken last April. Beech tends to, you know, bud very late in the year. Here in the Northeast, it's as late as late April or first week of May. Now, I want you guys to notice something. The silhouette of the soil itself has been considerably lower. This tree was repotted 1 year earlier, and I was very mindful that original soil was all the way up here. It just felt too heavy, too mounded. So I lowered to a lower profile, and I was very careful in my silhouette to how I shaped that soil so that there is some interest, nothing too overt, nothing too crazy, but just something to kind of, you know, putting in a little bit of interest in the silhouette of that soil. Again, everything in bonsai counts. And it's not only the tree, but it's how you treat the soil, it's how you treat the pots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here is how it looked. And I believe that that's a lot. This is maybe the last picture of the beach. Yes, okay. So now we're jumping on to a zelkova. And this is not as dramatic transformation, but it's an interesting kind of style. This wants to be a very classic, you know, broom style Japanese, very classic Japanese broom styles. You know, this sort of, you know, the broom style, as much as I would say something like a formal upright, don't leave too much for creativity, right? Not too much for self-expression. But there's something beautiful about working with that style that it forces you into a discipline that I think it teaches something different than if you were doing something that was a little more naturalistic, a little more expressive, etc. So once in a while, I do enjoy working in these sort of very rigid, if you will, styles. So here, if you can imagine that the original tree was just this right here, I started wiring down branches so that I can create a more rounded, more classic silhouette of the broom style. Oops. Here is about a year or 2 years later. Notice how much fuller that canopy is getting, but I still have to do some work. I still feel like the canopy feels just a little bit disorganized for my taste. I want to get it just a little bit more, not sure how the word would be, but I guess organized it would be the right word for me. Here it is in autumn. It has beautiful color. For some reason, and I think it has more to do more with environmental reasons than anything that I'm doing, this tree changes from red sometimes to like yellow and orange. It could be the light exposure, perhaps slightly different light exposure that gives me a slightly different kind of color every autumn. And this is again the same tree, just about a week later when all the leaves fell, and you can kind of see how everything is radiating a little more clearly from the two sub trunks here. And again, not completely finished, but you notice how the silhouette is almost there, almost perfectly round, and creating that classic broom style in Shohin size, of course. This is a Kashima Japanese maple. So originally, I acquired this from Suthin. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him. And this is a tree that I got back in 2007, I believe. And this is sort of what it looked like a year later after I purchased it from Suthin. Had a beautiful base, beautiful lower trunk movement, which I absolutely love. That was mainly the reason why I bought it. And this is a shot that I took in spring. It's got beautiful orange-red color in the spring. But what happened was, and you might be shocked about the next image, is this. So you may be wondering what happened here. Oh my God. So back in, my gosh, I can't remember, 2011 or 12, I had the tree, Kashima, first of all, likes to bud out or break bud early in the year. So as early, I would say, as maybe middle of February, you can see the buds kind of swelling. And when I first saw that, I said, well, I still have a long stretch of winter that I have to go through. So I don't want this tree in the middle of winter leafing out, right? So my idea was, let me try to hold it back and let me expose it to some more colder weather, basically. So I put it outside, and it experienced about 20-degree weather back to back, a couple of nights, 2 or 3 nights. Had very, very low temperatures, and I didn't think much of it. I thought it could take it, and I put it back inside, and I said, well, maybe this should hold it back a little bit. And sure enough, in like a week or 2 weeks, I started noticing that those bright red buds were turning like a dark red instead. And I knew I was in trouble. You could see a lot of the branching kind of shriveling up and all that, and it was, I knew the tree was in trouble. So all to say that most of it died, and I had to chop it back to all the live parts. This was the only thing that was left on the that long apex going all the way up here, all that was dead completely. So I had to chop it off, and here is where I intend to build my new top of the tree, basically. All right. The tree took a long time, but gained strength after that disaster. And this was about a year or 2 years later. It took a long time for that tree to bounce back. And here's where I'm starting to kind of wire my branches, trying to set up my new structure. So everything that is now left is very healthy. So I was very happy with it. At this point, I'm not chopping back a lot. I'm letting the tree really kind of do its thing, basically. So no pinching, no cutting back, nothing at this stage. Here's 1 year later, and you can kind of see now how the canopy is starting to kind of gain not only strength but volume and a lot more ramification. Okay, so I'm wiring where needed to get branches, place where I think that they're needed for to build my tree basically. And notice here how I'm again the beginning of my apex area starting to kind of take shape. And here's a tree about 5 years later, I believe. I saw this tree right after I took, more or less after I took this picture, but had I kept it, this top here needed to be fuller, needed to be rounder. It's a little deficient in the top, but it was well on its way, as you can see. Here is a shot of in the spring, and this is before and after. So yeah, what is it? 5 years between this and this. This is a Randy Knight maple, twin trunk maple. Of course, we know Randy Knight. He's famous for collecting those beautiful, incredible conifers that he he sells or to Ryan Neal, but somehow I didn't get this straight from Randy, but they told me that this came from Randy Knight, and I got it from an enthusiast, and he didn't want to work on the tree anymore, so I saw potential in it, so I took it, and this was the original front, and I turned the original back into my new front. I suspect that the original back was made the back because it had all these, a big chunk of ugly, dead wood. It had this big scar here. And again, this was not a classic at all. This will never be a classic feminine Japanese maple. This tree wanted to be more like an old oak. Again, sometimes you have to, I often allow the tree to kind of sort of guide me into what it wants to be. I don't want to sort of put my thumbprint or force my will into a tree that, I'd rather let the tree kind of guide me into what it wants to be. So I decided to turn the back into my new front. And when I repotted it, and I'm gonna go back real quick. This, one thing that I felt like this tree was really squatty, and this was the Nebari, right? And I said, well, if that's what I have to work with, that's what I have to work with. I was lucky enough that when I repotted it, I found a better Nebari at the bottom. Now, that original Nebari, that soil level was all the way up here, and I found a second Nebari on the top. This gave me the opportunity to kind of lengthen the neck, basically the trunk of the tree, and give it a little more elegance, if you will. So this was about a year later when it was repotted. And I decided, of course, to turn all that dead wood into a major feature of the tree. That really small round scar that was part of, this tree, this trunk here, I made it a lot deeper, and I lengthened the dead wood all the way, or the carving all the way to the top, just to kind of make it feel a little more elegant, a little more natural, if you will. And I carved this entire thing to make it, again, look like it was kind of like a rotted old trunk that had fallen off. Detail of the carving. You may wonder, how dark it is. And after I was done with the carving, I put some Indian ink into the carving to make it feel, kind of old, and just kill basically the brightness of the newly carved wood. Detail of the wiring. And part of the process for a lot of the cedar trees, not only this one, and I'm sure many of you are aware, is that you gotta let them grow, right? And then you gotta cut them back, let them grow, cut them back. It's a whole process, right? And this was no exception. I wanted to improve the transitions of the main branch into the secondary to the tertiary. So the only way to do it is to let the tree kind of just be a bush in the middle of the growing season, and then cutting it back, and then once again restarting a lot of that growth after the cutback. And here's a tree, same tree. I believe I was able to basically transform this tree in 2 years. I think, yeah, 2014, 2016. So I was very pleased, obviously, with how quickly I was able to transform this tree. If I saw this tree again right after I had done this, took this photograph, but had I kept this tree, even though it may sort of look a little bit like it may be finished, there was a lot of areas that I wanted to kind of go back and improve, shorten some internodes, et cetera, et cetera. But the tree already had the character that I was after. And once it has the character, now I can maybe just go in there and start the refinement process. I would say that, maybe 5 to 8 more years before this tree was really fully finished. This is a sharp pygmy. This is the tree that won Best Deciduous back in 2014, and this is the first picture that I got from it. This was, I believe, I think it might have been the next spring. Again, it had a very subtle movement. What I love about it is this very subtle zigzag movement, meandering movement all the way to the top. The tapering was pretty good. And in here, I'm trying to build my apex. It was quite efficient up on the top. And again, just wiring branches were needed to get that kind of very rounded, typical deciduous sort of silhouette, happening here. The tree as exhibited in the 2014 U.S. National. By the way, this was I'll tell you the story quickly because, it's probably worth mentioning. And I'll go back. Bill had seen a picture of this. I believe that was the same year, by the way. And I post a lot on a website called Bonsai Nut. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that, but I'm pretty active there. And I posted this picture of the sharp pygmy, and then Bill Balvanis sent me a private message. He says, "Would you mind showing this at the U.S. National?" And I wasn't even thinking. I mean, I was like years away from exhibiting this tree, to be honest with you. And I had not exhibited pretty much ever, I would say. That was my first exhibit. And but I'm not one to say no to Bill Balvanis. So I'm like, okay, I told my wife, how am I gonna say no to Bill? No, my tree's not ready. But so I went for it. I said, okay, yeah, sure, Bill. If you want it, I'll be honored to show it. And again, this is how it looked that September. The leaves were absolutely perfect, no scorching at all. I was lucky enough that year, it didn't get anything. It was just perfect for the exhibit. Even though I recognized that the tree looked a little bit young, I wanted that more rounded silhouette. It just felt a little bit juvenile for me. But lo and behold, I don't know, I got Best Deciduous, and I did not ask any questions. I just took my prize and I ran home. So anyway, that is this is a picture of the same tree about a month after it was exhibited at the U.S. National. So obviously, the leaves are off. Okay. And here is a year after. This was a photograph that was taken at there's a show, the Mid-Atlantic show in the Northeast. It happens every year. And I decided this is 2015 that I showed this tree in the spring. And this is what it's looking at. Now, notice, if you remember a couple of slides ago, it was just these 4 little things up here. And notice now how much more developed that apex is getting, more rounded. Again, I'm aiming for like a wide sort of, silhouette up on the top, as well as on the sides as well. This is the only Japanese maple in my collection that has ever flowered. I have not had any other bonsai, Japanese maple bonsai that has flowered for me, except this one. That year it decided to flower for me. It had never flowered before, and all of a sudden it just decided to flower. And they're quite beautiful. Here's a close-up of it. And the contrast between that really chartreuse green, which is typical of Sharp's pygmy, which I believe Sharp's pygmy is an American-made cultivar. Um, I forget, oh my gosh, I forget Mr. Sharp. That was his last name. I forget his first name. But he was the one who identified the cultivar and the one that developed it basically, and he was from Oregon. But it gets very, very dense, super dense, and it's a little bit similar to Shishigashira. I don't know if how many of you are familiar with that cultivar, but it's got extremely short internodes, and it gets really, really full. So every year I have to apply what we call, a partial defoliation. So every single, basically little branchlet, I have to cut, one leaf out of each pair. Otherwise, what happens is the interior just dies back, and just you lose all the interior branching. And here's a recent picture of it, the same tree. Notice how it's gotten like the nebari has really won quite a bit, much wider than it was a few years back. So I was very pleased with the development of that. And the tree now is getting a little more of a settled, more mature kind of look. Certainly not finished at all. There's this side here needs a little bit of filling out, but I'm kind of pleased with the way this has developed. And here is just for fun, I threw in a conifer, even though everybody thinks that they're deciduous. This is a ball cypress, highly adaptable to either very, very cold, like we have here in the Northeast, to even down, they come from Louisiana, down in the swamps and stuff like that, and they do great over there. But they actually thrive up here as well. I got this tree oddly enough because most of the ball cypress, at least that I've seen around, they're these huge collected trees, and they're absolutely gorgeous. Don't get me wrong, but this one was there was a vendor at one of the shows that I attended, and he was selling this one that he grew from a cutting actually, and he was small. It's only about 15, 16 inches tall, and unfortunately you cannot see it here, but it had a really beautiful nebari already, and I just liked it because all of these ball cypress are super big, and I like the charming small size of this one. So I got this, as indicated up here, the 2016. And then the following year, I decided to style it basically, and this is what it looked like. I started in this sort of classic informal upright, if you will. The only thing that is different here is that I'm throwing a second apex. Generally speaking, that would be kind of a no-no. You would take that out, but without that, to me, it seemed like it was just a very kind of regular, kind of boring, informal upright. So I wanted to throw in that second apex. However, with that said, I actually became bored with the whole entire thing. I thought, the world doesn't need another informal upright. There's some beautiful ones. I think this tree wants to be something different. So that year on the fall, I took all the wires out, and this is what it looked like. And I decided to turn it into a whipping style. And this is what it looked like a few hours after I had dewired it. I rewired again, and I went for a whipping style. Now, it is a challenging style to do it well. You also it needs to be pretty much kept all the time, almost all the time wired, because the tendency, of course, is for branches to kind of grow upwards. So you're really working against the natural tendency of the tree. So, I realized that's why I would not want to have more than just one, but I thought it was kind of a fun kind of thing, and I just sort of enjoyed it. And the next one, here's a shot of it I believe in the summer, and in the garden. And here, I believe the next one, it is now, this was taken last spring, and notice how much fuller it's getting. You know, here I'm just kind of playing with a little bit of a display in my studio and such. But my vision for it, again, I kept that second apex. My vision for it is to have this really a dense cascade of branches just coming down. So it's got a lot more to fill out, but I think it's coming along quite well. And here is the before and after, about 3 years. Amur maple, Acer guinala, and many times I refer as Siberian elm. Extremely tough, one of the toughest maples that I've seen around. You can literally, in fact, I did it. You can literally leave it outside in your garden, and you know, in like 0-degree weather, and it will just thrive. It's crazy how tough this maple is. And here is a shot of it, more or less at the time that I purchased this tree. This little twig here that I put in here, it kind of indicates my future front. And I believe that the next picture is right after a few hours of after I style it. And as you can see, I want to build a more of an informal broom. This is in contrast to the one that we saw a while back, the zelkova, which is the classic, very strict kind of rules on that broom style. This one is more natural. It's got looser sort of rules on it, but it's still kind of under the umbrella of the broom style, if you will. So here my aim is to create a much larger canopy for this trunk. So this is the beginning of it. This is a year later. Again, you can see how I'm lengthening my lines here to start creating more volume up top and start creating my canopy. Here's I believe another a year later, so 2 years after the first picture that you saw. And again, you can kind of see now that volume just being created. With Amur maple, you do not get the fine ramification that you would get in a Japanese maple. They tend to have a longer sort of internodes. It's a little coarser, but that's just part of the species. There's not much what you can do with that. You can defoliate it. This is, I believe, a picture right after defoliated the tree. You can defoliate it very, very well, just much like a trident maple, and the leaf reduces quite a bit by about 50 to 60%. At least that was my experience. I think the next one is same tree in autumn. You can see how beautiful it is, almost like a red pink than they can get. They're absolutely gorgeous. Some people call them flame maples, and rightfully so. And you may wonder, what are these weeds? And that was intentional. Those are not weeds. They're planted there intentionally. I wanted to create this mini sort of naturalistic wild scene, if you will. Some people like it, some people don't, but it's like anything else. And here's same tree about, I think, 4 or 5 years after that first image that you saw. So you see how that broom kind of, again, silhouette has been formed. And now I am in the process of really coming back and refining, wherever I can, shortening some of the internodes to kind of get it really nice and tight. I don't think I want to get more volume out of the tree. I think my volume is pretty good in proportion with the trunk, but it's just about refining the some of the segments of certain branches. Another conifer that I'm throwing in here. This is an eastern white cedar, or Thuja occidentalis. These are native to the Northeast and Canada. And, again, they do extremely well under cold conditions. They love water. And this is a picture taken back in 2002. It was collected in Vermont. Now, in this one, I will not take full credit, and I'll explain to you why. The next picture is Suthin. This is how the same tree looked about 7 or 8 years later. This is a picture that was taken at the first U.S. National in 2008. So that's what the tree looked like back then. So a lot of credit goes to Soothing for setting up the initial structure. Now, some people think that this was chopped off and a branch was pulled down. It was not, and I'll show you a detail. They actually, this died off naturally, and it has this two beautiful twists down, natural twist in the canopy, which is it's really quite beautiful. This is the same, again, obviously same tree. Right when I purchased it, and when I arrived in my garden, and I took a picture, and this was Soothing had styled it quickly before he sold it to me. And my vision for the tree, even though I really appreciated what Soothing had done, I wanted to build a wider canopy, and I wanted to also get some length in some of these foliage pads here in order to soften up the trunk line. I felt like it was just too much of a trunk, and then on the left side, and then green on the right side. I wanted to incorporate things just a little more. And here's a detail. Here's the top of the trunk here, and here's this natural twist creating the top of the tree here, and this branch down here is the one that creates the middle to the bottom part of the canopy. Here's a tree right before I started, so I left it to grow maybe a full year, so it looked kind of wild, as you can see. No form. I mean, the general form is still sort of there, but it's getting, really kind of bushy, and it needed obviously to be worked on. So I left it to grow in preparation for a styling, and this is what it looked like right after I styled it. Actually, no, that's not true. I had styled it about a month or 2 months after the previous picture, and the white was we had gotten snow that morning, and I thought it was kind of cool, so I put it quickly in the studio, and I took a picture, and that's what it looked like. And here's a picture of the same tree as it looked in 2008 at the U.S. National. It was exhibited at the U.S. National in Rochester in 2018. And you can see, okay, here's a picture of the same tree 3 months later at the Canopolis Winter Silhouette. And here is before and after 2008, 2018. I had planned to exhibit this tree once again 10 years after it was first exhibited at the U.S. National. So it was exhibited again 10 years later, and notice the difference, how much more mature the canopy feels now. It's got a little bit more length. It overall feels a little more mature and natural, at least to me. Okay, and that's it for the sharing my work with you guys. I don't know if you guys have any questions at this point.
Yep, we did get some questions, Sergio.
Okay.
One of them from Grant is, Sergio, are you using Boom mix for your deciduous soil mix?
I keep it, sure. I keep it very simple. I do not. I keep it very, very simple. And most of the time I just use straight Akadama for my deciduous trees. Sometimes I mix it with a little bit of Curio sand, which is like a coarse sand. It's not like beach sand. It's like almost like a small size pebbles or gravel. And I put that a little bit to keep my Akadama from compacting a little too much. But I've had a great success with using Akadama for about 25, almost 30 years now. So I like that. Not to say obviously that Boom mix doesn't work. Obviously it does, and people love it. But again, to answer your question directly, I use mostly Akadama.
Okay. And then Colin has a question about the beech forest and the zelkova.
Sure.
Have you used lime sulfur to treat the bark to get the bright white color, or is that just natural?
On the Japanese white beech, that's absolutely natural. What I had done is I had cleaned the bark really well before I took the picture, because they tend to get, in the growing season, they tend to get a little bit green in spots because of, you're watering so much that it gets a little bit of algae. So I took a toothbrush and I cleaned it very well. So no lime sulfur on the beech. However, on the zelkova, I did apply lime sulfur.
Okay. And then I think that Karen had sent this, I think, right after you had finished up about your garden. And she had a question that said, any lighting? So I think she's probably talking about, do you have special lighting in your garden at your place?
Well, if you're talking about the garden, no, it's just natural lighting. I mean, obviously, the sun and whatnot. I get in my garden, I get about maybe 6 or 7 hours in the middle of summer of sunlight. So I get pretty good light where if I need to grow some conifers, they can grow well there. But yeah, mostly I shoot at all times of the day. Even without sun. But yeah, it's really, at night you may have seen, maybe you might referring to a couple of night shots that I took. The night shot, it was I have lighting in my garden, artificial lighting at night, and that was probably what you saw there. But otherwise, in the daytime, it's just obviously natural light.
Okay. Maria wants to know, you mentioned the little weeds in your Acer Amur. What kind of plant is that again, the little weeds?
That's sea lavender. It's called sea lavender. Those little plants that I used.
Okay. And then one last one. What's your fertilizer type that you use for your deciduous trees?
Yeah, so again, I try to keep it kind of simple, but what I use mainly is BioGold. Now, again, not to say that that's the only way to fertilize, certainly not, but I use BioGold. Of all my years of trying different fertilizers, I have to say BioGold, I'm very pleased with the results of BioGold. And I mix that, I sort of combine that with fish fertilizer. And also, now in the autumn, I also use a oh my gosh, it's called Bonsai Pro. I believe it's made by Dynagrow, the fertilizer, and that's what I use. It's a pretty balanced. I think it's like 7, 7, 5, 9, something like that. It's fairly balanced, and I use that. But other than that, not much else.
Okay. And then this just came in from Wes. It says in Sergio's interview.
Sorry, lad. I'm sorry. Let me just close the loop on the fertilizer. And many of you may know this, but obviously I don't fertilize everything equally, right? So if something is in a high developmental phase, I fertilize the hell out of them. But if they're more finished, I hold back. For example, Japanese maples, I don't fertilize them until the leaves harden in June, at least in this area is around June. So again, different strategies for different phases, but I'm sure a lot of you guys know that. I just wanted to kind of mention that.
Good. Yeah, I think that to clarify, that was awesome. And then Wes said, in Sergio's interview with Ryan Neal, Sergio commented that he likes to draw the lines of a deciduous tree. Can you explain that?
Yes, I will try to explain the best way I can. My background is painting and drawing and design. So I always equate. In fact, I was telling somebody the other day that I have the bad habit of, and this is I picked up this from my painting days, where I used to set up my easel, right? And I used to work for like hours standing up because I wanted to put, as soon as I put my brush strokes on the canvas, I wanted to step back to see what I was doing and how the brushes were defining the form that I wanted to depict. But so I picked up that bad habit, or it's good. It could be good and bad. And I always put my trees, I always work with my trees against a blank wall. I don't work in, with noise in the background because it doesn't allow me to really tell what's happening. So I put it all in a clean background, and I always wire and work on my trees standing up. I realize I'm not certainly not telling you guys you should do what I do, because after 8 hours of work, my my legs are, just killing me. But it's just it's something that's how I work. So going back to the question is, for me, I equate wiring branches to how I'm able to draw my trees, so that, you know what I mean, like I can move the branches. I'm sort of drawing them with my, with my hands. I'm looking at it, and as I'm wiring, I'm able to kind of quote unquote draw my tree. I'm not sure if that is really answering your question. Is kind of hard for me to kind of explain the, that sort of idea or concept. But does that even help?
Says makes sense. Yep. And Wes said thank you. So yep. Thank you,
Of course.
Sergio.
Yes. Of course. Yeah. I mean, again, that's the best way I can describe it. Is like I can draw my trees through wiring. So again, to me, I always go back and I always equate any actions that I do, any kind of approaches that I do with my trees, to my days of painting and drawing. To me, they're intrinsic. They're very much all interconnected, all linked together.
It makes perfectly sense. And then Ken asked, can you talk a little about how you create the branch structure on deciduous trees?
Yes.
Specifically, developing the leader, secondary, and tertiary branches.
Okay, well, I would say, let me just start by saying that when you have something a little more realized, more ramified, right? I kind of sort of liken the branch to like a hand, and if you put your palm out with all your fingers and you move some fingers up and other fingers down, that's sort of how I approach my design for the for branches in deciduous. When we design for conifers, typically, not all the time, right, but typically it's a little more structured. They're a little bit flatter. You lay one branch over the other to create kind of your volume there, but they lay pretty flat for the most part. In deciduous, it's more about the volume. Well, conifers, you need to get volume on the pads for sure, but with deciduous, that branch is I don't try to do a kind of like a flat structure on that branch. I take it, again, much like a hand, and I move my fingers up and down to create that kind of volume and that sort of sense of that when you look at deciduous trees, they don't have that rigid structure. They're kind of softer. They're a little more, perhaps a little more informal than what you would think of a conifer, perhaps. So, that's sort of how I build it. Whether they go up and down, it depends on the tree. Sometimes they grow. I have the sharp pygmy. They all all the branches kind of face up. But then at some points, I kind of turn them down, but always they sort of tend to go up and out, until they create that very rounded canopy. So much unlike like a conifer, right, where you kind of bend branches down, and sometimes they sort of stay down. Yeah, the tips kind of face up, but it has more of a downward sort of motion to it. With deciduous, they have a very decided sort of like movement towards the towards the tips. They kind of go up, and that's what gives you that typical deciduous like feel. I think, in my humble opinion, I feel like many deciduous trees in the US are designed, and I've seen this a lot with tridents. They're designed in a way where they're very conical. They have a very sharp, very sort of pine-like, if you will, structure to it. And I love to see deciduous being treated a little more like a deciduous, a little more rounded, in form.
Outstanding. Okay, well, that's all the questions we have for right now, Sergio. So I'll let you get back to the presentation.
Okay, great. So rock and roll. We'll go to the first case study number 1. This is a Japanese maple, as you guys can see. This is a picture that a photograph that the grower provided to me when I first purchased it back in 2008. For some reason, I love the tree. Maybe it was because it was so dense. And this is the picture from her place. This is the picture that she sent me. This is a picture that same year. I believe this might have been November or December. I was studying the tree here, and I was looking at it. I wanted to understand the tree basically, right? I always, when I buy a tree, no matter in what phase, I always kind of I don't immediately jump into styling that tree or putting my stamp on it. I kind of wanted to study, and I sort of look at the tree and I sort of ask the tree what it wants to be. In this case, you know, as you can see, it's sort of like an informal upright, you know, style. You can see some areas where I have cut paste on it. That's where I made some chops to kind of simplify the structure. And basically that's what it looked like that year. And but one thing I will tell you is that before I jump into the next slide, is that I did become very bored with this tree, and I did not know what to do. I did not like it after a while, and I thought I wanted to sell it or put it in the landscape or something. I just did not like the tree. I became again very, very sort of I guess displeased with the way it was looking. So I had the idea of creating a twin trunk design out of this maple. And what I did was, in order to do that, I had to air layer a portion of that tree. The reason why I needed to air layer and get that material from the same tree is that if I had taken something, you know, another tree, another Japanese maple, and I had grafted it into this tree, it would have worked, but the problem is you end up with different leaf quality, different leaf color, and potentially different part quality. So whenever you want to do something like this, you must assure yourself that you're going to take it from the same tree. In this case, it was this lower branch that I did not need, and this was going to be my future second trunk. So here's a detail of it being air layered. Again, a close-up of the air layer. Notice here how the roots are growing around the perimeter of the bag. This is a tree after the air layer was removed. The original branch was right here. You can see the cut paste, the wound that it created, and it created a big negative space here that, of course, that was going to eventually be filled with my second trunk. And this is what the tree looked like without that branch. This is a detail of the air layer branch that I was taking. I believe it was removed. Usually air layers on Japanese maples take typically about 8 weeks to 10 weeks. So within a growing season, you can air layer and you can remove the tree or that branch after the growing season. This was removed in August, and it stayed in this spot until the next spring. And in the next spring was when I was going to graft that same branch into and make my twin trunk design. So this is what it looked like, I believe, very shortly after I had grafted that second trunk to the parent tree. Now, this little guy here was a root graft that I did. So that's why it's this little funny thing happening here, because I needed to add a little more detail in that part of the nebari. I needed a root there, so I added it. So this is what the tree looked like when I put the two together, the original tree and what it was, a branch. Now it's becoming a second trunk. Here's about a year later, I believe. Again, the tree is beginning to develop quite nicely. My grafted second trunk was developing well. I was happy about that because, again, it could have gone the other way and it could have died, but I was lucky that it did well. So I was very encouraged by this whole thing. This is about 2 years later, and you can see I'm starting to get lengthening my lines in order to kind of start creating my canopy basically, and while I'm developing the rest of the tree. Notice in Nebari how well it has developed from the first pictures that you saw. And here is about a year later. Notice how much fuller the tree has gotten around, and how much full that second one has gotten. This is a detail of the grafted. Here's the point of the graft, and notice how it has completely fused together at this point. This is about, I'd say about 2 years after it was grafted. I also, this is all the original branch, right, that we had, we saw a moment ago that was grafted. I mean, that was air layer and then grafted. And I kept this little crawling branch here because I thought it added a unique touch to the composition rather than just cutting it off and keeping this trunk. I love that little guy just crawling at the back of the composition. And picture of the same tree in autumn. It gets beautiful orange yellow color. Again, Japanese maples, I absolutely love them, in part because they are so beautiful in autumn. And here's a tree last spring. So again, you can see how well has developed. Okay, you may wonder too the whiteness of it. I did apply lime sulfur before I took the picture, just to even out the color throughout the entire tree. And here's a quick shot of just it posing with that zelkova that you guys saw a while back. And again, it's got beautiful color like most maples do in the spring. This was taken in, I believe, last April. And here is a quick before and after 2008, 2020. So that's what, 12 years in the making. So as you can see, went from like a upright kind of thing happening to a twin trunk design with a brand new front, which I didn't talk about, but this front was achieved not from wire or anything like that, but it was just simply I had chosen a different angle to get this type of front. Case study number 2. So we're going to talk about root grafting. I don't know how many of you have done root grafting, but again, I always say that, people should really try to practice and even master grafting, not only root grafting, but thread grafting, approach grafting, because it really allows you more flexibility and allows you to really elevate your material exponentially. I mean, you can get an nebari that looks kind of okay to an excellent nebari just through root grafting. So it's really well worth spending the time to kind of practice it and master it, if you guys can. But I always encourage people to do that. So here is a Japanese maple once again, and we're going to talk a little bit about root grafting. So here's a problem. There's a whole section here with no roots, as you guys can see. The arrow points out to the groove that I had to make in order to insert my seedling, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, so you need to cut a groove first. And this is a close-up of the groove. Now, some folks do it with hand tools. I like to use a Dremel, but you have to be very careful and your hand has to be very steady. Otherwise, you'll make a mess out of it. And, so you may want to resort to hand tools. Perhaps it might be a better choice. But for me, it works well with the Dremel. You can see the cambium layer being exposed here, being shown with the green, coloration here. Ideally, when you're doing root grafting, you want to do it at the same time that a tree needs repotting. However, that year this tree did not need a repotting. So what do you do? So what you do is, or what I did was, I cut a pie shape. I simply cut a pie shape without touching the rest of the roots. Just took it out of the pot, and I cut a pie shape in order to accommodate the future roots of the seedling that I'm about to graft. Here's my seedling, Japanese maple seedling. And here you notice this thick root here is what is going to form part of my surface root. This is the root that I'm interested in. I am trying this out for fit. And again, you can see that the fit is quite tight. You do not want to create something that is too wide and is ill-fitting. You want to make sure that it fits in really, really snug, because otherwise it's just not going to take. So the tighter it is, the better. And it's extremely important that after the operation is done, that nothing moves. Otherwise, once again, it's likely to the root graft to fail. After I tried it all for fit within the groove, I secured the whole thing with a push pin. There's different products that they sell. I think Jonas sells this sort of grafting nails that has a little bit of a rubber piece in it. They work well too, but push pins work just as well. And right after that, I cover the whole thing with cut paste, just to keep my area very clean, keep water out, all that stuff. So it's always a good idea to cover wounds, and in this case, again, the graft joint, with cut paste. And here's a shot of the whole operation kind of done. You can see down below here how the roots, the whole mass of the roots from the ceiling kind of fit in that pie shape that I cut previously. And also the wiring is done, not for aesthetic reasons, but in this case, you want to wire your ceilings. And again, it depends on the tree that you're working on, but this tree gets very, very dense in the growing season. And anything that I leave underneath it is going to die because it doesn't get any air or any light. So I had to wire it, that ceiling outside of the canopy in order to ensure that ceiling will get enough air and light to thrive. If it doesn't thrive, obviously the graft is likely to fail. And here is the whole operation done. The tree is back in its original pot, with the grafted seedling in place. And I believe that the next shot is 2 years later, and you can see this is my new grafted root. There is that little scar left, and I did not take a picture, but I should mention that if you can imagine that seedling going all the way up here, right? That was the base of the trunk of that seedling. And when it finally fused with the parent trunk, I did not cut it right flush with the root. I left a little stub here and let it just naturally die back. And once that happened, and usually takes several months to a year, I cut it right flush with the against the nebari of the tree, and then it'll just close up like any other scar. So this is 2 years later. Now it's very addicting. We can argue now that we can use another root here, and and the story keeps going on and on and on. So you can do as many as you would like, but at least in this case, I was able to close the gap, make it a little more interesting with the addition of that root. Okay, case study number 3. Again, a very simple technique, which is air layering. And some of the best trees, in particular shohin in Japan, were not really created from growing them in the ground or growing them in pots. They were actually created from air layering. It's an excellent way, and I think it's underutilized in my opinion. Excellent way to get better material out of something that is not so good. Again, in bonsai, as we know, it's not about size, it's about quality. So in this case, this was a perfect example. This is a white Japanese beech that I got from Julian Adams out here in the East Coast. And I liked the tree, I liked the top of it, but I hated the whole thing, meaning that it had a very long sort of neck, what they call a long trunk, and all the ramification was up here. In my estimation, would never make really a good tree out of this. However, through the methods or techniques of air layering, I wanted to create a multi-trunk design out of this tree. So first step was to air layer it right at the base, right where the first trunk, or I should say branch came out. There's another one at the back. And again, my vision was to create a sort of a clump style, multi-trunk style out of that beech. And very, again, critical when you do, an air layering, the top cut needs to be very precise, very clean. The bottom, not so much. It's okay. You can lax a little bit on how clean you do the bottom. It's not as critical, but because we want the roots coming out of here, that cut needs to be very, very clean. Now you need to cut through the entire vascular system, right into what they call the sapwood, and clean out all of this stuff with a knife. If you leave any live cells, and this happens often with deciduous and in particular Japanese maples, they would take the easy way out, meaning that they're not going to create roots. They're just going to bridge, what they call bridge, the top and the bottom, and they're going to again recreate basically the vascular system will regrow and join the two. When that happens, clearly it's not going to entice a tree to produce roots, but it's going to keep growing the way it was before. So it's critical that that portion, the entire portion gets cleaned out very, very well. When you read books, I think typically they tell you inch, thick and a half of the trunk. This is more or less, doesn't have to be exact or whatever, but the point here is has to be wide enough. I've seen people where they do just a leaf, like maybe a quarter of an inch, or sometimes even less. That's not good, because again, the tree most likely at that distance is going to bridge. So you want to make sure that you create quite a bit of distance between the top and the bottom to prevent bridging. Here's a shot of it being air layer. I want to make sure that I put enough media in there. I usually use sphagnum moss for my air layerings. It works pretty well. And I was crossing my fingers, because with Japanese maples, it's much easier to create air layers, almost like foolproof. Even if you do it wrong, it's almost like they will create roots in spite of your bad technique. With Japanese beech. They're notoriously difficult to air layer. And when you do air layer them, if you can, you will only get one or two roots on one side. I was lucky enough in this case, sorry about that. I was lucky enough in this case to get roots all around. I use hormone, in case you guys are wondering. It's called Clonex, but I think you can use almost anything. I'm not sure how much it helps, but it cannot hurt to use hormone, rooting hormone. And that's what I used. And this is, again, you can see the mass of roots that it created. Now, again, with Japanese maples, you can probably separate in, like I said, 8 to 10 weeks. This beech took me 1 year to create this mass of roots. So it takes a while. That shows you the kind of different timing and how different species react to these different techniques. And I'm about to separate the top from the bottom, because it's pretty much ready. I mean, I have roots everywhere. I'm separating here the top from the bottom. And I've been asked this question. People tell me, well, right after I separated it, I comb out the roots because I wanted a flat nebari and such. I would highly recommend anybody ever doing a layer not to do that. The root system at that point is still very tender, so you're likely to do more damage than good by combing out all that mess. You wanna, the aim here is not static so much, but the aim here is that tree survives, does well. So I basically just take it as is, take the plastic off, and what I do is I just put it in a pot and put my medium, in this case Akadama, all around it. I may tease out the surface root, the surface of the root ball just a little bit, and then put my soil and wire it in place to secure the tree in the pot. But I don't do much of anything else. Now, the coming of the roots will come later. Obviously, you need to work out the nebari, but that will come like a year or 2 years later after that root system has gotten a lot stronger. And here's the before and after. You can see the original material. On the right, of course, is my what I want to, that the sort of multi-trunk design. Now, at this point, I'm not worried about, wiring or anything like that. I just want to leave the tree alone and have it survive, do well. And then in the future, in a year or 2 years, that's when I'm going to start thinking about my design. And I did a quick sketch of my vision for the tree in, I don't know, maybe another 10, 15, 20 years from that time. Case study number 4. This is an interesting, and this is, by the way, the last case study. Okay, so I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with a guy by the name of Japanese guy by the name of Abihara, very famous bonsai master, and he invented a lot of crazy techniques to improve Japanese maples or deciduous trees in general. But he worked a lot with Japanese maples, and one of his techniques, which I always wanted to try, and I finally found the tree that I wanted to try this on, is this, as you can see, Japanese maple. Very quickly, I will tell you a little bit of story. This was imported from Japan originally into the Kenneth collection, and in the importation process, unfortunately, the 4th trunk had died. You can see down here a big scar that I'm trying to close in. It was unfortunate that it died, but now I'm left with 3 trunks. I still think that this tree has a lot of potential to be something wonderful in the future. So I'm working with it. And one of the things that I wanted to try out, by the way, you might be wondering, this green pot here, that's a thread graft that I'm doing. What happened was, when this 4th trunk died, this other trunk was left with no branches whatsoever on this side. Anything that you see here is coming from this trunk here, not from here. So I needed to basically populate this side here with branches. So one of my things was to do a thread graft, and you can see it happening here. But the other technique, which is the Abihara technique, is the one that I'm showing you now. Is I wanted a section of this branch here. I did not need, and it was fairly well sort of developed, if you will. And what I wanted to do is, how do I take that branch, instead of cutting it off, right? Because most likely you say, well, I don't need that branch, I'm going to cut it off. Usually that's what happens. This is the beauty about this technique, is that you can actually reuse that same branch and relocate it to another part of the tree. In this case, the green arrow is indicating where I'm going to take that branch and I want to cut off, and I want to relocate it to this side of the tree, right in here. Now, how do we do that? Because we cannot just cut it off and just stick in there. Obviously, it's going to die. So we need to graft it. Again, this is the same the tree in last April. Okay, still with the thread graft is still in progress, and here is the operation that I'm explaining to you guys. So here is, I took a Japanese maple seedling and I grafted. The point of graft is actually not visible. There's another point here, and I did that with some tape just to secure the whole thing. But here is the point, and I'm going to show you another picture close up so you guys can see it better. So I needed to take a Japanese maple seedling and graft it to that tree. Why do I do that? In order for eventually have this little seedling, right, support that piece of the branch. Because eventually, when I cut it off, this is the root system of that seedling is what's going to support that branch. Here is a few months later. Actually, this is August. I took this in August. No, might have been early September that I took this shot. And here is the graft. I'm going to show you in a moment a close-up of it. Here's a close-up. Okay. So I had used grafting tape to basically secure my seedling into the grafted. Here is the branch that I want to reuse right in here, and here is where my the graft point is, and I secure it with, again, with grafting tape and wire. Here is with the grafting tape removed and with the wire, and you can see that it's completely fused now. Now, what I'm doing is rerouting the source of water basically from the original base of that branch to this. Once I cut that, this branch is going to be fed by that seedling, and I'll show you in a second. So now it's time to cut it off right at the base of my branch right here. That's the base of it, and this is my seedling. Here is removed. Now here is a branch that I'm reusing, and here is my seedling. Here is a close-up of the cut branch at the base. Here's my seedling again, and now again this branch is being fed by the roots of that original seedling. Now, I don't need the top of the seedling anymore, so I just lop it off. I don't need it. Eventually, all that is going to cut away, but I leave a little stop. And to explain the mechanics a little bit of how that works is that eventually, and I did this as a schematic, that base of my branch that I want to use, I want to carve a small peg out of that, okay? That peg is going to fit into a pre-drilled hole into my selected new area, and it's going to just go in. The green area represents the cadmium layers that is going to join with the branch, and I'll show you in a second. And that will eventually fuse, and I'll have my branch in place. I know there's probably a lot of questions on this one, so forgive me. I'm trying to explain the best way I can, guys. So here is my separated branch is doing fantastic. It's being fed by the original seedling. Here's a new location. Now that branch, it was way over here, right in this area, and I'm gonna put it right in here. This was the original area of a branch that apparently somebody cut off because it died, or they thought they didn't need it. So why not reuse that same bulge, that same base that it had, and put a new branch in there? And so that was my new selected area. I'm gonna drill a hole next year, okay? I'm sorry, I'm not gonna show you the whole thing because I just separated just a couple weeks ago, and I have to wait until next spring in order to do my operation, but that's gonna be a hole, and that peg that I explained to you guys will fit right into that hole. Just for placement, just to give you guys an idea of what it may look like, I put the branch next to that area, and this is what it would look like after it's been grafted. And you guys are gonna have to wait until next year to find out what it is. So next spring I will do the second phase of the operation, and I believe that that's the end of the presentation. I have a couple of slides that I'm going to show you, but it's not really related to this. So before I go into that, I want to throw it back to you guys if you guys have any questions.
As a matter of fact, we do. So, so for Maria, she wants to know, what do you do in terms of maintenance on the air layer over that course of that year? So I think she's talking about that. This came up with the air layer earlier, where you said that the beech,
yes,
it took a whole year for it to get that root system.
Sure.
There was another one here from Ryan where it says, how do you protect the roots in the air layer over the winter? Did you wrap them with anything? So I think they're kind of both wrapped up in the same thing.
Sure. So I treat it very much like, I have not really done any fertilizing of the air layers or anything like that. I just water it, much like you would water a potted plant, because they're in sphagnum moss, or at least that's what I use. They stay pretty moist, and they're wrapped in plastic. They stay pretty moist for long periods of time. So certainly they don't need watering all the time, or at least that's been my experience. One thing that that I do do in this on my air layers is that I poke a few holes on the bottom of the bag just for that excess water to kind of drain. Some people don't do it. I like to do it. But very much like the holes on a pot, that's what I do. But as far as watering it, once in a while, just water, make sure that it stays moist, never dries. And as far as winter care, not much at all. Just like a little shohin or anything like that. You know, you put it in your greenhouse, you put it in your cold storage, unheated, you know, garage or space, and with not much else. Same thing with the air layer. I don't do much at all. I just put it in there, attached to the tree still, right? And that's it. It's very, very simple, very, very easy. Not much about like wrapping it in anything to protect it from winter or anything like that. Certainly, I would not recommend, you know, leaving the tree outside with an air layer in like 10-degree weather. I've never done that. I always keep my temperature around right above freezing as much as I can. So I would say, you know, obviously I would not, you know, expose your air layer to very, very cold, you know, winter temperatures. That would be the only thing that I would say. But other than that, they're it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. John had a question when you were talking about the cleft grafts. He says, do you score the side of the seedling before inserting the seedling in the cleft on the Nabari of the tree?
Yes. Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, I do scrape it more than cutting into it. I kind of scrape it a little bit just to expose that, you know, the cambium a little bit, and that's enough. That's enough in my experience. One thing I should point out too, that in my experience, you need to make sure that seedling fits into the groove almost 100% of its diameter. What happens is, in my experience, if you leave it kind of like maybe 50% and 50% is sort of outside, the tree tends to reject the graft. So I try to make sure as much as possible to have 100% fit basically into that groove. And then make sure that, again, you secure it with like either grafting nails or push pins or something like that. I think it's crucial that whole union, that whole, you know, does not move at all.
Outstanding. Heidi has, does the tree have to be a certain size or age to, she says air grafted, but I think maybe means air layering it. Does it have to be a certain size or age to air layer?
No, not at all. I mean, I've air layered, you know, all trees as much as I've air layered, like, you know, young branches, for example, of Japanese maples. They may have been like maybe 2 or 3 years old. That's it. So no, I think you can air layer, you know, pretty much any kind of age. You don't have to wait. It doesn't have to be, you know, a specific age in order to air layer anything. No.
Okay. And Millie wants to know, on the bench graft, what do you do in your spare time?
On my bench graft?
Says on the bench graft, what do you do in your spare time?
What do I do? You know, you know,
I think she wants to know, do you have a job, or is this?
Yes. Okay, I get it. Because I was going to say, I just love bonsai, man. I just do it all the time. I do have what they call a day job, and I work for a large. Well, I'll tell you guys. I work for Nickelodeon. I don't know if you guys know Nickelodeon, but I work for them. And yeah, so that's my day job. But this sort of has become a second job for me, and I love it. I you know how people refer to a job as kind of almost sometimes as a bad thing. This bonsai for me has become a second job, but I mean in a good way, in a good sense. I think it has transcended the hobby level, and now I love it. I you know, for me it's just like if I could do this, you know, 24/7, I really would.
Well, it shows. It shows not only in just the quality of your trees, but just the passion when you're talking about what you do for it, Sergio. This is awesome.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ken Wassam had one and says that I think it was right when you're getting into your Nabari, but it said, please briefly describe how you work the Nabari when excuse me, let me start over. Please describe briefly how you work the Nabari when repotting deciduous trees to optimize its development.
Yeah, so again, fairly straightforward, right? You kind of comb out the roots. I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. Combing out, make sure that they're nice and organized. You don't have a mess. When you're working the roots, anything crossing, anything growing downwards, you cut off. You want you want that root pad very, very flat, and you want those roots going really sideways rather than downwards. You notice, I mean, let me go back real quick. You notice on this tree, even in this tree, that I'm growing on a box. Let me go back. Sorry, it's taking me a little bit. My computer's been working all day, so I think it's tired. I think it's going. It's like it's been going. Okay, so yeah, if you notice here, I've noticed people that planted in like really deep boxes. No. You wanna. And by the way, I put this tree in a box because it was weak when I got it, and I wanted to strengthen. One of the best ways to do that is planting in a box. I think it's because the roots, the wood allows the root system to breathe better, essentially, and the tree is really gains a lot of strength. But anyway, so going back, without trying to digress too much, oh boy, I did lose my train of thought. Oh, how do you work the roots? Yeah, so it's all coming out. There is, again, talking about Abihara, he also came up with a technique, and maybe some of you guys know, it's pretty well known these days, where you put a piece of wood or some sort of hard material underneath the root pad in order to force the root to go sideways rather than downwards. Most people use wood. The reason for that is because you can literally position those roots, like you can put nails on that wood and position those roots exactly where you want it. That's an excellent way, an excellent technique. I will be honest with you, I don't really use that technique. And I think you can create excellent nebari without resorting to that technique. I mean, one of the guys that come to mind is Dolbo Albanese. I mean, he's grown some of these trees 40, 50 years, some of these maples, and they have awesome nebari, and I don't believe he has ever used that board technique. But if you guys want to give that a shot, or maybe you guys are already trying it out, excellent technique to get a very good nebari out of it. But again, essentially, it's just really combing out the roots, not allowing. You need to work them every time you repot it. You need to comb out those roots. You cannot sort of give it a break and say, maybe I'll just skip it, maybe another year, or I'll look at the nebari in the future. That's how things get out of whack, and it's very difficult to fix a bad nebari. So you got to be on top of it as much, if not more, than your top. And obviously, you cannot work it more because you only have the opportunity to work on your nebari every time you repot, and that's what maybe once every. For me, I repot my maples every 2 years, every 3 years, sometimes once a year. But you don't get to see your nebari or your root system as often as you do to the top. But you've got to be on top of it in order to get the best results.
Outstanding, Sergio. That was the last question, but this has been absolutely fantastic for us trying to get this going. So you've been.
Thank you. I'm hoping. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that again you guys got something out of this presentation. Really quickly, just so you guys know, the last 2 slides, I wanted to show you a sort of a service that I'm providing. Which is digital painting. In case anybody's interested in this COVID world, I thought this may be something that people may be interested. Forgive me, I'm flipping through the slides. I'm getting there in a second. I'm doing this digital, offering this digital service. And what it is if you have a tree that you're having difficulty with trying to envision the possibilities for that tree, what can be done? The left image in this case was a client of mine that said, I don't know what to do with this tree, and what would you do? And I told him to take a few pictures of it, different angles and such. He did. I like this angle better. the best one out of what he sent me, and I envisioned this tree kind of being almost, planted on a rock. So what you're seeing on the right is completely a digital painting that I created based on this tree. And what it does is, you always will have something that you can print out and frame if you like, but more importantly, is kind of like a roadmap to show you what is possible with your material. So this is one example that I did with for a client of mine, and the second one was a big old hunk of oak that that he was interested in knowing what would I do with it. And so again, on the left is a photograph that he provided to me, and on the right is a digital painting based on what he sent me, and an idea, again, just a vision for what that tree could become, maybe, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years into the future. So that's it. If you guys want to see more of my work, you're more than welcome to go to m5bonsaiworks.com. You'll see a lot more of my stuff there. I just show you a portion of some of my work. So please feel free to go and visit me there. And I thank you very, very much.
Wow.
Thank you,
And
Sergio.
I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you all, finally.
Yay, Sergio.
Great
Thank you,
presentation.
man. Outstanding. Outstanding. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Sergio.
And
Ali,
Sergio, like I said, he
yeah.
put his website up there, but I'll ask Bruce. We'll send a follow-up email with the website on it. Also, everyone know that this is being recorded, so we had a couple people that came in late.
Yeah.
So we'll figure out how to get the recording where it's a link. So if you want to watch it again, to see the things again from Sergio, he's been gracious enough to let us record it and share it with our members. So we thank Sergio for letting us do that too. And so just one quick thing that we didn't get a chance to mention to everybody that we had been told, but Bonsai Northwest is closing. John has made the announcement that he's closing, I think November 8th or something like that. So it's like 6 weeks away or something like that. So just want to let the members know and stuff that that John's shutting down the shop. He's still going to be growing on Vashon and still growing material for wholesale sales and stuff like that, but he will not have the retail market there right now. So big blow to our little bonsai community, but hopefully somebody will come in and take over and start building it up again and stuff. So, but John just wanted us to release that to the membership so everybody knew. So I'll probably see everybody there Wednesday, get first in line, going, get pots, I'm gonna need wire, before he shuts down. So just want to let everybody know that. But Sergio, again, thank you so much for this. We really, really appreciate it. You are going to be one of our first choices when we can fly people back out here again, my friend. So you can be with us, and the next time you give us a demo and stuff. But want to thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to, Lad. And again, thank you so much for inviting me. I really do appreciate the opportunity, guys, to share a little bit my passion, for sure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sergio.
Thank you,
Everybody
Sergio.
check out his website. We will again send out an email out with the recording on it once we can kind of get that figured out. And Sergio's a little more information with his website and stuff like that. But if you guys need anything, you can get a hold of me and we can help out. And thanks everybody for coming for our first one. We got our next one next month on the 4th Monday. It's going to be Jonas is going to be with us on telling us 10 things he wish he knew before he started doing bonsai. So it should be a really good program. And then even next year, we're going to have Eric Schrader come on November. He's going to be coming and talk about root over rock. And then next year, tentatively, we have Cheryl Manning, Michael Hagedorn, Dan Robinson, Jennifer Price. We got a bunch of really quality people lined up. So
goodness, that's some heavy hitters there you guys have. Wow, what a lineup.
very excited. So
wow.
We'll keep in touch with the newsletter, everybody. Tony, do you have anything you want to?
No, I do. I just want to again, Sergio, thank you so much for the presentation. It was great. Lad, thank you for putting this together for our first one. I think it's a success. And all of you, thank you for attending this. And we hope that you spread the word that, hey, we have this thing going, and that every month we're going to try to do something, even though we don't physically get together, we are going to be able to virtually do this now. And I think the possibility, actually, if you think about it, the possibilities now is wide open. We've got quite a bit of people now we can invite internationally, even, you know, not only United States, but now we could look at globally potentially. So this is exciting, guys. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much. Everybody have
Thank
a
you.
great month. Thank you, Sergio. We'll be in touch.
Thank you so
See you
much.
soon, everybody. See you at Bonsai Northwest.
Bye
All
bye.
right.
Good
See ya.
night.
Bye.
Bye bye. Good night. Bye bye.